Welcome to KMC Technologies Group. We help organizations build secure cloud foundations, modernize infrastructure, strengthen cybersecurity, automate operations, and adopt AI responsibly. In this video, we are going deep into AWS landing zones, what they are, why they matter, and exactly how to create one using AWS Control Tower. Before we begin, subscribe to the KMC Technologies Group channel for practical cloud, AI, cybersecurity, automation, and managed IT tutorials. A landing zone is not just a control tower setup wizard, it is the cloud foundation your workloads will inherit. KMC approaches landing zones as a life cycle. Assess the current environment, design the target operating model, implement the foundation, and then operate it continuously. That is the mindset we will use throughout this tutorial. Welcome to AWS landing zones, from concept to implementation. The goal is simple. By the end of this video, you should understand the architecture of a landing zone, the AWS services involved, the decisions you must make before deployment, and the exact build sequence using AWS Control Tower. We will also walk through a realistic enterprise landing zone design so you can see how the pieces fit together. Here is the learning path. First, we will define the landing zone and the services behind it. Second, we will create the landing zone in a practical sequence. Third, we will apply the same design to a sample enterprise. Keep this pattern in mind: strategy, accounts and OUs, identity, controls, networking, security and logging, workload onboarding, and operations. A landing zone is a well-architected multi-account AWS environment that becomes the starting point for workloads. It gives you a baseline for account structure, identity, security, governance, network design, and logging. A useful way to think about it is this. Instead of every project creating its own account, network, logging, and permissions from scratch, the landing zone establishes the rules first, and workloads inherit that foundation. This distinction is critical. AWS organizations is the hierarchy and policy foundation. AWS Control Tower automates and governs a landing zone on top of organizations. The landing zone itself is bigger than either service. It includes the entire platform design and operating model. If you remember only one sentence, remember this. Organizations is the hierarchy, Control Tower is the governance automation, and the landing zone is the complete cloud foundation. Why not keep everything in one AWS account? Because accounts are powerful isolation boundaries. A mature landing zone separates production, non-production, shared infrastructure, security, and sandbox use cases. This reduces blast radius, simplifies cost ownership, allows different policy sets, protects central logs and security tooling, and makes account provisioning repeatable. AWS recommends designing OUs around function and common controls, not around the company org chart. A production landing zone combines several capabilities. Organizations gives you accounts and OUs. Control Tower orchestrates governance. IAM Identity Center centralizes workforce access. Controls enforce or detect policy. CloudTrail and Config provide evidence. Security services centralize detection. Networking provides shared connectivity. Account Factory standardizes new accounts. And for advanced environments, automation such as AFT or Landing Zone Accelerator makes the foundation reproducible as code. This is the architecture we will build toward. The management account is reserved for organization and control tower administration. Foundational accounts sit in dedicated OUs. For example, security accounts for logs and security access, and infrastructure accounts for network and shared services. Application teams deploy into workload accounts, usually separated by lifecycle, such as non-production and production. Governance, identity, and central evidence span the entire governed environment. Design the OU hierarchy before you click Set up Landing Zone. OUs are policy inheritance boundaries. A common starting pattern has security, infrastructure, sandbox, workloads, and suspended. Under workloads, you can separate non-prod and prod. The exact structure depends on your organization, but the principle is consistent. Group accounts that need the same controls. Avoid copying the HR reporting structure into your AWS OU tree. Control Tower uses shared security accounts, so workload administrators do not control the same evidence used to investigate their activity. One account centralizes logging evidence, and another supports security or audit functions. AWS Control Tower version 4 introduced different default labels for these shared accounts, so you may see CloudTrail Administrator and Aggregator in a new environment, while older landing zones may still show Log, Archive, and Audit. The security architecture principle remains the same. Identity should be centralized from day one. IAM Identity Center lets administrators assign users and groups to AWS accounts through permission sets. Instead of creating IAM users in each account, users federate and receive temporary role sessions. For workloads, use IAM roles and short-lived credentials. Root users should be protected and treated as emergency credentials, not as normal administration identities. Control Tower gives you 3 governance behaviors. Preventive controls stop actions from happening. Detective controls identify non-compliant resources after they exist. Proactive controls evaluate CloudFormation resources before they are provisioned. A practical governance sequence is to start with the mandatory baseline, then add strongly recommended controls, elective controls, and finally organization-specific policy as code where required. Region strategy needs to be decided early. The home region is especially important because AWS says it cannot be changed in place after the landing zone is deployed. You can govern additional regions later, and you can use region deny controls when you need to restrict deployment outside approved regions. Base the decision on data residency, latency, service availability, disaster recovery, cost, and your ability to operate each region. Networking is one of the most consequential landing zone design areas. Many enterprises place transit gateway, routing, DNS, centralized egress, inspection, or shared endpoints in infrastructure accounts. Workload accounts then attach their VPCs to approved patterns. The exact design can be centralized or distributed, but the landing zone should define the pattern before dozens of application teams invent different approaches. Central evidence is foundational. CloudTrail records API activity. AWS config records resource configuration and compliance. Security services such as Security Hub, CSPM, and Guard Duty can aggregate findings across accounts. The important design principle is separation. Central evidence and security administration should live outside workload accounts, and day-to-day security operations should use delegated administration where the AWS service supports it. You do not need every landing zone tool on day one. Start with Control Tower as the governed foundation. Add Landing Zone Accelerator when you need a broader security, compliance, network, and operational baseline. Add Account Factory for Terraform when you want account vending and account customizations managed through Terraform and version control. The important rule is to avoid complexity without a clear operating requirement. Before setup, lock down the major design decisions. Pick the home and governed regions. Create dedicated shared account email addresses. Define your OU hierarchy and identity model. Decide the network pattern and security services. Define account naming, tagging, budgets, and ownership. Decide which controls you will enable. And most importantly, define who operates the landing zone after the initial deployment. This is the complete build path. We start with planning, prepare the management environment, launch Control Tower, define governed regions and controls, structure OUs, provision member accounts, connect networking, centralize security and logging, configure access, and finally onboard workloads. The sequence matters because each later step depends on the decisions made earlier. Step 1 is architecture. Document the account strategy, OU boundaries, regions, identity, network, and platform standards. A landing zone is easier to change when only a document exists than after dozens of accounts and workloads are running. The design document should be explicit enough that another cloud engineer can understand which accounts exist, why they exist, and which controls apply to them. Step 2 is preparation. Control Tower can create a new organization or be added to an existing AWS organization's environment. In an existing organization, Control Tower uses the existing management account and does not automatically govern every OU that already exists. Prepare the shared account email addresses or existing accounts you plan to use. Also verify organization account quotas and management account access. Now we begin the actual setup. Sign in with administrative access, open AWS Control Tower, and verify the region shown in the console. That region will be your home region, so do not continue until you are sure it is correct. Then choose Set up your landing zone. The screen shown here is conceptual because AWS can change console layouts, but the workflow remains the same. Select the home and governed regions, configure shared accounts and logging, decide identity integration, review permissions, and launch. In the configuration flow, review regions, OU names, shared accounts, logging, retention, and identity. In a new Control Tower 4.x landing zone, AWS may show newer default shared account names than older tutorials. You can also choose whether Control Tower manages the organization-level CloudTrail trail and configure log retention. Review every choice carefully, especially the home region and account decisions. After you review the configuration and required permissions, launch the landing zone. Control Tower runs automated pre-launch checks, integrates with organizations, establishes the shared security resources, configures the baseline, and applies mandatory governance. Once deployment finishes, do not immediately start moving workloads. First, verify the organization page, shared accounts, landing zone settings, identity center access, and Control Tower dashboard. Next, build out the OU hierarchy. You can create OUs through Control Tower or register existing OUs into governance. The critical concept in current Control Tower is the baseline. Governed OUs should have the AWS Control Tower baseline enabled, and controls then apply at that OU boundary. Design controls by policy purpose. For example, the prod OU can have stronger restrictions than Sandbox while still inheriting organization-wide security controls. Account Factory is how you standardize account creation. Instead of manually creating accounts and then trying to retrofit governance, the platform team vends an account into the correct governed OU with a known owner and identity assignment. Mature environments add naming standards, mandatory tags, budgets, network patterns, and post-provisioning automation. This is also where AFT becomes valuable when you want the request and customization process driven through Terraform and version control. Now implement the shared network. This example uses a dedicated network account and transit gateway. On-premises connectivity enters through the network domain. Shared services, non-production, and production VPCs attach with segmented route tables. Route 50i Resolver handles hybrid DNS. An inspection VPC can centralize security inspection and egress. IPAM can allocate CIDR space across accounts. The important lesson is to define and automate this pattern before you have dozens of workload VPCs. Step 9 is security operations. Control Tower gives you governance, but you still need an operating model for security services. Enable organization-wide security services, use delegated administrator accounts where supported, aggregate findings centrally, and define how alerts become incidents. Security Hub, CSPM, Guard Duty, Config, CloudTrail, Inspector, Backup, and Encryption standards should be integrated into the platform rather than left to individual application teams. Finally, configure access and onboard the first workload. Permission sets should map users to only the accounts they need. The workload account should receive the standard network, logging, backup, tagging, budget, security, and deployment baseline. Then deploy an application through infrastructure as code and verify that the landing zone controls behave as expected. The platform team should create paved roads, secure self-service paths, rather than becoming a ticket queue for every cloud action. Let's put everything together. Our sample organization has 500 users and is migrating applications to AWS. It needs separate production and non-production environments, centralized logs and security operations, hybrid connectivity, enterprise identity, sandbox capability, and a scalable provisioning model. For the walkthrough, we will use US East 1 as the example home region and US West 2 as the example disaster recovery region. These are examples only. Your actual region choice must follow your business requirements. For the KMC walkthrough, we create security, infrastructure, sandbox, workloads, and suspended OUs. Security contains central logging and security administration accounts. Infrastructure contains network and shared services accounts. Sandbox contains experimental accounts. Workloads is split into non-prod and prod. And each business workload gets its own accounts based on lifecycle and isolation needs. This lets us apply the strongest controls to production without unnecessarily restricting development experimentation. Here is how the landing zone changes the developer experience. The CRM team requests a production account. Platform and security approve the owner, cost center, and data classification. Account Factory vends the account directly into the prod OU. Automation connects the network, sets budgets and tags, applies logging, backup, and security configuration. Identity Center grants the team a scoped permission set. The application deploys through CCD. From that point forward, central controls, findings, logs, cost, and drift remain visible to the platform. The landing zone is a platform product, not a one-time project. Review control tower updates, monitor for drift, adjust controls, manage account lifecycle, govern costs, run security operations, maintain network architecture, and continuously automate repetitive requests. Assign a platform owner, maintain a roadmap, document design decisions, and test changes before pushing them broadly across the organization. Watch for these common mistakes. Do not choose the home region casually. Do not run workloads in the management account. Do not organize OUs around reporting lines. Do not enable a huge set of controls without testing application impact. Do not postpone network architecture. Require ownership metadata for every account. Automate onboarding before manual work becomes the standard. And assign a real landing zone product owner. Use this checklist before production onboarding. Confirm regions, OU design, management account protection, shared security accounts, identity center, logging, network, account factory, controls, cost standards, drift management, lifecycle processes, break glass access, and automation. A good landing zone is intentionally designed, initially small enough to test, progressively automated, and continuously operated. These are the primary AWS references used for this training. AWS continuously updates Control Tower, organizations, controls, account factory, landing zone accelerator, and AFT, so always verify the current documentation before making production decisions. Use this presentation as an architecture and implementation guide, but treat the AWS documentation as the authoritative source for exact current console behavior and prerequisites. A well-designed landing zone becomes a business platform. KMC Technologies Group can support the full lifecycle: organization and account strategy, control tower, identity, controls, security services, networking, automation, migrations, FinOps, and ongoing operations. The recommended approach is to start small, prove the pattern with a few accounts and workloads, govern it, automate it, and then scale. Thank you for watching. You should now have a clear mental model of an AWS landing zone and a practical sequence for building one with AWS Control Tower. Subscribe to the KMC Technologies Group channel for more hands-on videos covering AWS, Azure, AI agents, cybersecurity, cloud architecture, automation, and managed IT. For implementation support, visit kmctechnologiesgroup.com, email sales@kmctechnologiesgroup.com, or call 530-512-004. Keep learning, keep building, and keep meeting commitments.